The descendants of soldiers who served in the Gallipoli campaign of World War I, along with world leaders, streamed onto the battle sites and were present at the ceremonies marking 100 years since the failed British-led naval invasion against the Ottoman Empire. President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan made a speech at the commemoration along with Britain's Prince Charles and Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott, whilst Prince Harry was present at the ceremony. Stating that Çanakkale is as much a message of victory for Turkey as it is a source of sorrow due to the number of people who lost their lives, the president said Çanakkale and Gallipoli are important places to send a message of peace to the world. Our memorials are the symbol of all the 500,000 young people who lost their lives on these lands. Erdoğan and Prince Charles each laid wreaths at a memorial for the fallen Turkish soldiers at Gallipoli before listening to a recitation from the Quran as well as prayers for peace. A band in Ottoman Janissary costume performed old Turkish military marches. A total of 90 senior representatives from 73 states, including 21 heads of state such as Albanian President Bujar Nishani, Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev, Bosnia and Herzegovina Chairman of the Presidency Mladen Ivanic, Djibouti President Ismail Omar Guelleh, South Sudan President Salva Kiir Mayardit and Irish President Michael D. Higgins, were present at the ceremony. 3 parliamentary speakers, 3 vice presidents, 5 prime ministers, 28 ministers, and 6 heads of international institutions were also present at the ceremony, according to Turkish media. President Erdoğan had invited 102 heads of state, including Armenian President Serj Sargsyan, to the Gallipoli commemorations, which are traditionally commemorated on March 18 every year. Sargsyan turned down the invitation in an open letter to Erdoğan, calling on Turkey to stop its denial policy. The Armenian president had previously invited Erdoğan to the centennial commemorations of the Armenian genocide in Yerevan. Turkey denies that the mass killings and deportations of Armenians in 1915 at the end of World War I amount to genocide. Authorities took very tight security measures reminiscent of martial law practices in the western province of Çanakkale, which hosted ceremonies that began on Thursday. Prince Charles, we shared duty to overcome intolerance and fight hatred, prejudice. Charles, the Prince of Wales and heir to the British throne, visited the Çanakkale Martyrs Memorial and British Helis Memorial on Friday where he gave a speech. Charles talked about the many who had lost their lives, saying, despite the appalling sacrifices made by so many in 2 world wars, intolerance combined with the willingness to use the most barbaric violence remain a persistent and prevailing source of division and conflict. We all have a shared duty, to find ways to overcome intolerance, to fight against hatred and prejudice so that we can truly say we have honored the sacrifice of all those who have fought and died here in Gallipoli and elsewhere, he added. Charles spent the previous night aboard the HMS Bulwark, the flagship of the United Kingdom's Royal Navy, which was docked outside a marina on the Dardanelles. Representatives of countries that once faced off in one of the most iconic battles of the war as well as guests honored the dead in a joint ceremony on Friday, the centenary since Australian and New Zealand Corps, ANZAC, landed on beaches here. The doomed Allied offensive to secure a naval route from the Mediterranean to Istanbul through the Dardanelles and take the Ottomans out of the war resulted in over 130,000 deaths on both sides. It came to be seen as the folly of British war planning. Erdoğan arrived in Çanakkale on his private plane, Anna, in the morning along with Family and Social Policy Minister Ayşenur Slam, Culture and Tourism Minister Ömer Çelik, Forestry and Waterworks Minister Veysel Eroğlu, Economy Minister Nihat Zebesay and Secretary-General of the Presidency Faruk Kasırga. Speaker of Parliament Cemil Çiçek, Energy Minister Taner Yıldız, Head of the Religious Affairs Directorate Mehmet Gormay and Governor of Çanakkale Ahmet Nar welcomed Erdoğan at the airport. Erdoğan, we grieve as much for Armenians as we do for 4 million dead Muslims. Erdoğan also spoke at the Çanakkale Centennial Peace Summit in Istanbul the previous night, where he criticized the European Union after the European Parliament, EP, and several EU member states including Austria and Germany passed motions or signed declarations recognizing the massacre of Ottoman Armenians by Ottoman Turkish forces as a genocide. Calling on the EU, Erdoğan said, I undertook the duty of Prime Ministry for 12 years. At every international summit that we visited we said we are prepared to open up our archives. I'm saying let Armenia open them as well. If there are third countries with archives, let them open them too. I'm even going a step further, we're also ready to open our military archives. Also touching on the events of 1915, in which thousands of Armenian deportations and forced marches took place as Ottoman officials were worried that Christian Armenians would side with Russia, its enemy in World War I, Erdoğan said, "These assaults on our people and on us are definitely ill-intentioned. As we do not ignore any pain, we will not allow pains to compete against each other. We grieve as much for the Armenians who lost their lives as we do for the 4 million Muslims who died during exoduses." German President Joachim Gauck on Thursday condemned the massacre of Armenians by Ottoman Turkish forces a century ago, calling it a genocide, which the Berlin government had long rejected. The recognition of the events as genocide by EU states and the EP came days after Pope Francis generated fury in Turkey by using the same term. Turkey decided to recall its ambassador to Austria on Wednesday after parties represented in parliament signed a declaration recognizing the massacre of Armenians a century ago as genocide on Tuesday. Canonical commemorations overlap with Armenian genocide commemorations. Criticism was recently raised against the government and the presidency for initiating the Gallipoli ceremony on April 24 instead of March 18 as usual, allegedly in a bid to overshadow the centennial commemorations of the Armenian genocide in Yerevan. The annual April 24 commemorations mark the day when some 250 Armenian intellectuals were rounded up in what is regarded as the first step of the massacres. The event is widely viewed by historians as genocide, but modern Turkey, the successor to the Ottoman Empire, vehemently rejects the charge, saying that the death toll has been inflated and that those killed were victims of civil war and unrest. On Thursday, the eve of the centennial, President Erdoğan again insisted that his nation's ancestors never committed genocide. The Turkish head of state did however send Reverend Patriarch Aram Atijayan, the acting patriarch of the Armenian Patriarchate of Turkey, a statement saying he respectfully commemorates all the Ottoman Armenians who lost their lives amid the conditions of the World War I and expressed his condolences. Atijayan held a religious ceremony in the Armenian Patriarchate of Istanbul on Friday to commemorate the losses in World War I. On this day that carries a special significance for our Armenian citizens, I once again respectfully commemorate all the Ottoman Armenians who lost their lives amid the conditions of World War I and extend my condolences to their children and grandchildren, his statement said. I commemorate with compassion and respect all the Ottoman citizens, regardless of their ethnic and religious identity, who lost their lives under similar conditions during this war, Erdoğan's message said, adding, "Let me reiterate that we are cognizant of the sorrowful events experienced in the past by the Armenian community and that I sincerely share your pain."